Convicted Ponzi schemer Bernie Madoff is breaking his silence and blasting Wall Street, saying bankers and hedge funds had to know what he was doing. CBS News business and consumer correspondent Rebecca Jarvis here now this morning with more on this. Rebecca, good morning.
Good morning, Chris. And this is a saga that has lasted multiple years. For nearly 16 years, Bernard Madoff orchestrated the biggest Ponzi scheme in history, defrauding investors of $65 billion. He's been silent on the matter since his arrest in 2008, but today he's speaking out.
Bernie Madoff met for 2 hours with a New York Times reporter Tuesday for his first published interview since his December 2008 arrest. Madoff, noticeably thinner than in the past, continues to claim his family knew nothing about his illegal activity, but says that major banks and investors had knowledge of his Ponzi scheme, contradicting previous statements that he was solely responsible. They had to know, but the attitude was sort of, if you're doing something wrong, we don't want to know. Madoff, who now lives in a 12-foot cell with a roommate, is serving a 150-year sentence for defrauding $65 billion in investments and phony profits, acknowledged his own guilt, but claims unidentified banks and hedge funds were also at fault for failing to look into inconsistencies in his business.
If Bernie Madoff gives anybody any names or specific financial institutions that had concrete evidence that he was running a Ponzi scheme, they will face civil and criminal exposure.
Madoff said he follows news reports about himself and seems surprised to learn in recent lawsuits that bankers claim they had doubts about him before his deception was revealed. I'm reading more about how suspicious they were than I ever realized at the time. While he's cooperated in the recovery of investor assets, Madoff has refused to provide any criminal evidence related to his fraud. Madoff also disputed claims that he refused to attend funeral services for his son Mark, who committed suicide in December. He said his attendance at the funeral would have been, quote, a media circus and cruel to my family.
So Rebecca Jarvis with us now again, and let's talk this over for one second, because he's talking about banks and hedge funds having known what was going on. Let's say, in fact, we do find out that that is accurate. Could those banks and funds face prosecution?
Well, certainly if it turns out to be accurate, they certainly could, because there's still billions and billions of dollars in wealth here that has yet to be recovered from this Ponzi scheme. But the question really comes back to, who is Bernard Madoff? Has he made contradicting statements? The answer to that question is yes. And the reality here is that if these big banks knew, then why didn't Bernard Madoff's own family know about this? He's suggesting that they did, but his family, who's very close to the situation as well, certainly has been accused of knowing, but hasn't been found to be knowing.
This is the first time that he has spoken in 2 years. He's serving this 150-year prison term. Like you said, he contradicts himself quite a bit. So why should anyone believe what he is saying now?
Well, and that's going to be a hallmark of any kind of case against this, any banks. You know, if it's all about allegations and what he's saying, then he's contradicted himself already, and how are we to believe him about that? One point to make, however, is that we talked about this a few weeks ago. JP Morgan is now facing a lawsuit because of exchanged emails and allegations that people were aware that this was going on at the bank.
For the victims, if in fact, if anything that he is saying is now true, what does this mean for them as far as a recovery, potentially?
Well, if it is true, and if there is found to be knowing at the major banks, then they probably will play a role in paying back some of the victims, but that still is a long ways away, and there would still be a lot of legal issues before them.
Still have to prove they were complicit.
Absolutely.
And that is way down the road. All right, Rebecca Jarvis,
Thanks.
Thank you.